LETTER the 38th of Life in Mexico. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Life in Mexico by Francis Calderon de la Barca. Letter the 38th. New Minister. San Angel. Profitable pulque estate. The village. Surrounding scenery. The Indians. The padre. The climate. Holy Week in the country. Dramatic representations. Cocohuacan. The Pharisees. Image of the Saviour. Music and dresses. Procession. Catholicism amongst the Indians. Strange tradition. Paul V. Contrast between a Mexican and a New England village. Love of fireworks. Ferdinand VII. Military ball. Drapeau. San Angel, March 30th. It is a long while since I last wrote, but this week has been employed in moving into the country, and making arrangements for the sale of our furniture, in consequence of our having received official news from Spain of the nomination of a new envoy extraordinary and minister plenipotentiary to the Republic of Mexico. As on account of the yellow fever at Vera Cruz, we shall not wish to pass through that city later than May, it is necessary to be in readiness to start when the new minister arrives. On Thursday last we came out to this place within 3 leagues of Mexico, where Don Francisco Tagle has kindly lent us his unoccupied country house. As we had an infinity of arrangements to make, much to bring out and much to leave, and all Mexico to see, you will excuse this long silence. Our house in town we leave to the guardianship of the housekeeper, the other servants follow us here. This house is very large, and has a fine garden and orchard full of fruit, with pretty walks all through it, and a sort of underwood of roses and sweet peas. It is a great pulque hacienda, and, besides what is sent into Mexico for sale, the court is constantly filled with the half naked Indians from the village, who come to have their jarros filled with that inspiring beverage. Then there is Doña Barbara, the guardian of the pulque, a Spanish administrador, a number of good-looking Indian women, and babies à discrétion. There is a small chapel, a piazza with handsome pillars going all around the interior courtyard of the house, a billiard table, and plenty of good rooms. In front of the house are the maguey fields, and the azotea commands a beautiful view of the neighbouring villages, San Angel, Coyohuacan, Mizcoaque, etc., with their woods and gardens, as well as of the city itself, with its lakes and volcanoes. As C n's affairs take him to Mexico nearly every day, we feel a little lonely in this large house, even though perfectly comfortable. And besides the extreme stillness and solitude, it is not considered safe for us to walk out alone, consequently the orchard must bound our wishes. And, of course, being prohibited from going further, we have the greatest desire to do so. In the evening, however, when our caballeros return, we frequently walk down to the village, where the English minister has also a house. San Angel is pretty in its own way, with its fields of maguey, its scattered houses that look like the beaux restes of better days, its market-place, parish church, church of El Carmen, with the monastery, and high-walled gardens adjoining, with its narrow lanes, Indian huts, profusion of pink roses, little bridge and avenue, and scattered clusters of trees, its houses for temperamento, constitution, as they call those where Mexican families come to reside in summer, with their grated windows, and gardens, and orchards, and then the distant view of Mexico, with the cathedral towers, volcanoes, and lofty mountains, scattered churches, and long lines of trees. And nearer, the pretty villages of Cocohuacan and Mizcoaque, and everywhere the old church, the broken arch, the ancient cross with its faded flower garlands, to commemorate a murder, or erected as an act of piety. All is so characteristic of Mexico that the landscape could belong to no other part of the known world. There is the Indian with his blanket, extricating the pulque from the maguey; the ranchero with her reboso and broad-rimmed hat passing by upon her ass; the old lepero in rags, sitting basking in the sun upon the stone seat in front of the door; the poor Indian woman, with matted hair and brown baby hanging behind her, refreshing herself by drinking 3 elacos, halfpence worth of pulque from a jarrito, little earthen jar; the portly and well-looking padre, Prior del Carmen, the Carmelite friar, sauntering up the lane at a leisurely pace. All the little ragged boys, down to the merest urchin that can hardly lisp, dragging off their large well-holed hats with a "Buenos dias, padrecito" (Good morning, little father), the father replying with a benevolent smile, and a slight sound in his throat intended for a benedicite. And all that might be dull in any other climate, brightened and made light and gay by the purest atmosphere, and bluest sky, and softest air, that ever blew or shone upon a naughty world. We are now approaching the Holy Week once more; in Mexico a scene of variety in the streets and of splendour in the churches, but in the country a play, a sort of melodrama, in which the sufferings, death, and burial of our Saviour are represented by living figures in pantomime. We have heard a great deal of these representations, and are glad to have the opportunity of seeing them, which we intend to do in the village of Coyohuacan, where they are particularly curious. Besides this, our friends the A.S. have a house there for the season, and as the city of Cortes's predilection, it is classic ground. Meanwhile, for the last few days, the country has been overrun with Pharisees, Nazarenes, Jews, and figures of the Saviour carried about in procession. All this in preparation for the Holy Week, a sort of overture to the drama. The first evening we arrived here, there was a representation of the Pharisees searching for Christ. The Pharisees were very finely dressed, either in scarlet stuff and gold, or in green and silver, with helmets and feathers, mounted upon horses, which are taught to dance and rear to the sound of music, so that, upon the whole, they looked like performers at Astley's. They came on with the music, riding up the lanes until they arrived in front of this house, which being the principal place hereabouts they came to first, and where the Indian workmen and servants were all collected to see them. They rode about for some time, as if in search of Christ, until a full-length figure of the Saviour appeared, dressed in purple robes, carried on a platform by 4 men, and guarded on all sides by soldiers. It is singular that after all there is nothing ridiculous in these exhibitions; on the contrary, something rather terrible. In the first place, the music is good, which would hardly be the case in any but a Mexican village; the dresses are really rich, the gold all real, and the whole has the effect of confusing the imagination into the belief of its being a true scene. The next evening the same procession passed, with some additions, always accompanied by a crowd of Indians from the villages, men, women, and children. Bonfires were made before the door of the hacienda, which were lighted whenever the distant music was heard approaching, and all the figures in the procession carried lighted lamps. The Saviour was then led up to the door, and all the crowd went up to kiss his feet. The figure which is carried about this evening is called Our Saviour of the Column, and represents the Saviour tied to a pillar, bleeding, and crowned with thorns. All this must sound very profane, but the people are so quiet, seem so devout, and so much in earnest, that it appears much less so than you would believe. The cross was planted here in a congenial soil, and as in the pagan East the statues of the divinities frequently did no more than change their names from those of heathen gods to those of Christian saints, and image worship apparently continued, though the mind of the Christian was directed from the being represented to the true and only God, who inhabits eternity, so here the poor Indian still bows before visible representations of saints and virgins, as he did in former days before the monstrous shapes, representing the unseen powers of the air, the earth, and the water; but he, it is to be feared, lifts his thoughts no higher than the rude image which a rude hand has carved. The mysteries of Christianity, to affect his untutored mind, must be visibly represented to his eyes. He kneels before the bleeding image of the Saviour who died for him, before the gracious form of the Virgin who intercedes for him; but he believes that there are many virgins of various gifts, and possessing various degrees of miraculous power, and different degrees of wealth, according to the quality and number of the diamonds and pearls with which they are endowed; one even who is the rival of the other, one who will bring rain when there is a drought, and one to whom it is well to pray in seasons of inundation. Mexico owes much of its peculiar beauty to the religious or superstitious feelings of its inhabitants. At every step we see a white cross gleaming amongst the trees, in a solitary path, or on the top of some rugged and barren rock, a symbol of faith in the desert place, and wherever the footsteps of man have rested, and some 3 or 4 have gathered together, there, while the ruined huts proclaim the poverty of the inmates, the temple of God rises in comparative splendour. It is